Now, this is going to be a great conversation. I can feel it before we even start.
So, has mental health reached where it should reach in the world? The answer is no.
There's technical training, there's the physical training aspect, and then there's the mental training.
How many zeros did Tendulkar score?
Fair amount.
Right? And how many centuries?
100.
And the number of athletes who get lost, who are not able to cope with pressure, who drop out simply because those mental skills, not strength, but skills were missing at that time.
Practice doesn't make perfect. Only perfect practice makes perfect.
So if I am practicing at 40% intensity, then my mind is learning 40% intensity.
One of the things that we should make it mandatory for young people is watch sports. Play, of course, but watch it also.
If you are you have a football and you have to kick a goal post, and if you just put a static poster of a goalkeeper, your kick is going to change.
Now, this is going to be a great conversation. I can feel it before we even start. And one of the most interesting things for me in sports is the mental aspect of sports. I mean, we talk so much about natural talent and physical fitness of an athlete, but we don't really touch enough about the mental aspect of the game as well as the mental health issues that are affecting sports and athletes today. My guests are not only experts on the subject, but they have had a front row seat to watch some of the greatest athletes in the world. Joining me today are Dr. Samir, Parikh and Divya Jain. I'm just going to introduce them real quick. Dr. Parikh was appointed by the Indian Olympic Association as the Chief Mental Wellness Officer for Team India at the 2024 Paris Games. He's an eminent psychiatrist working in the field of mental health for close to 3 decades and is the chairperson of the Fortis National Mental Health Program. Divya Jain was also a mental wellness officer for Team India in the Paris Games. She's a sports psychologist and the head of psychological services for the Fortis National Mental Health Program. She works in the field of performance enhancement and mental health with elite athletes and teams. So, firstly, Dr. Parikh and Divya, welcome to my show. It's really nice to have you.
Great to be here.
So, for the past few days, I've basically been spent reading your book, which if you are a sports fan, frankly speaking, it's something you really can't put down. So if you sports fans are out there, it's called The Champion Within: Life Lessons from Sports Psychology. It's actually not just for sports fans. It's something that you can learn in your daily lives. It's co-authored by Dr. Parikh and Divya. So firstly, it's a fantastic read, and I have a lot of questions from what I read in the book, which I'll get to. But wanted to start with a few more general questions about mental health and mental training in sports. What is the actual ground reality in India regarding the need for mental trainers in sports? I mean, because you read about mental coaches and IPL teams and other sports teams hiring mental coaches, but is mental training in Indian sport still something they're doing just to tick a box, or are athletes genuinely starting to value it as core to their performance?
So, Pranav, I'm going to let Divya speak a bit more on the sports aspect. But before we do that,
Sure.
my thought around this is athletes come from the same society, same community that we all are from. So, what is your area of work doesn't change the fact that you are still coming from the same society. So, has mental health reached where it should reach in the world? The answer is no. Is there more conversation, especially on social platforms? Yes. Has this converted into more and more people actually seeking help at the right time? No. Do we have a long way to go? Yes. So be it schools, be it the corporate sector, be it sports like we are talking about, we are far away from where we should be. The stigma is a reality. The hesitation is a reality. The struggle in silence is a reality. You will be okay with almost everything except when it comes to taking a mental health support. And this is a phenomena which happens across the board. And I think that's where the concern is, rather than only looking at sports. But having said that, I think Divya is in a lot better position. The fact that she works very closely with athletes as compared to I do. So, yeah.
So I think whenever we're watching a match, you hear the commentary, people are only talking about the mental aspect of the game. They're talking about someone's body language, someone's confidence, what kind of streak they're going through. And yet, when it comes to actually training that aspect, there is such a gap that we are seeing. The way I like to see it, there's technical training, there's the physical training aspect, and then there's the mental training. You ask any player about, your VO2 max, endurance, flexibility, agility, how much protein, how much carbs, they'll have all of those answers so clearly. And the minute you start talking about mental training, focus, confidence, there just isn't, that vocabulary is not there, the specific techniques, what can I do at this particular moment that can improve my game. Looking at most mental training starting about 6 months or 1 year before the Olympic Games, rather than something starting about 8, 10 years before you are planning to reach your Olympic Games, right? And so that becomes a very tick in the box, that it's difficult to bring about too many changes at so close to that time. And the number of athletes who get lost, who are not able to cope with pressure, who drop out simply because those mental skills, not strength, but skills were missing at that time. So that is a reality.
But Divya, just sticking with the Olympics, you actually, if you could stay, and even Dr. Parikh, if you can say, how mentally, when you went to Paris, how mentally ready were the Indian athletes for the Paris Olympics? And what were the biggest psychological challenges you had to work on when you were there?
No, I think to be fair, um, these are champions, and one needs to understand that for every sport that is in the Olympics, you are looking at various rounds of qualifications that happen, and eventually a handful of people reach there. These people who've reached there have reached there not overnight by working overnight. These individuals have worked for a very, very long time. Picking from what Divya had said, what we need to understand is the success some of our elite athletes, some of our champions have had, we need to understand and up it. So let's say player A performs exceptionally well, see what all that player A did, and then add to it, and then go a few years backwards. So rather than looking at just a few months or years for that matter before a big event like the Asiad or World Cup or the Olympics, how about going Khelo India -1?
Hmm.
And that's where you integrate this. I think that's the way to look at it.
So, you mentioned something interesting, and I think the conversation is going to flow this way because forget my questions. I'm getting so much from you. You talked about, I think it should be Khelo India -1. Let's not even reach the -1 part. Are there plans in place, or are there the early beginnings of infrastructure to make sure that it starts from even Khelo India level and things like that?
To be fair, yes.
Okay.
Right? We also need to understand that for any country, there is always going to be years and years of legacy that is always going to be there. And especially when it comes to mental health. For me, the answer to your question lies in the two of us going to the Olympics. Would I have ever thought that a psychiatrist, a sports psychologist, to be appointed by IOA to go with the team as a part of the medical team and be a core part of the medical team of the Indian contingent? This would have been unheard to dur ki baat hai, it would have been unimaginable. So if the thought process wouldn't have been there, we wouldn't have gone. It could have been anybody else. I would have had the same joy. Any psychiatrist, any sports psychologist, fabulous. Because what has happened now is this can't change. You will never have big tournaments without mental health support as a part of the medical team. These are steps in the right direction. But
I was just going to say it's a giant leap, a small step but a giant leap. Yeah.
Yes.
So I actually moving a little bit on mental health that we're talking about, right? And I want to talk a little bit about, over the last few years, there's been a lot of athletes that have come out. Simone Biles, Michael Phelps in India, Robin Uthappas talked about it openly on mental health issues that he faced. And then you have, the mental fitness aspect of it. And I would love to get your views on, you have for physical health, we have our tests, our MRIs, our scans, our X-rays that we do to say, okay, this person needs physical rehab. And for physical fitness, there are tests as well, right? Fitness tests that are conducted. It feels like the line between mental fitness and mental health is a bit blurry, a little bit unclear to maybe someone like me. Maybe it's very evident to you, but How can an athlete and their coaches tell the difference between not being mentally fit enough and actually having a mental health issue?
Honestly, I think what is important is to reach out for help. I don't think that it's necessary at the level of a coach or an athlete to recognize where on the spectrum they lie, which particular aspect we're looking at. Because if you look at sports psychology now as well, it's not just about performance enhancement. You are looking at the well being of an athlete first and foremost, and then you look at performance enhancement because it's not possible to have one without another. Right?
Hmm.
So what is important is to recognize that is there any area where you are struggling? It could be in terms of your moods, your thoughts, it could be changes in your sleep, your energy levels, or it could be that you're not performing up to the mark, not doing as well in a competition as you were in practice, or you find your confidence dipping, changes in body language, changes in interpersonal interactions. Any of these signs, all you have to do is you have to look, you have to listen, and if you're able to do that, then frankly, beyond that, we don't really need too many tests to be able to support athletes at this time.
Yeah, I think it's a great point because athletes will have a lot of things when they feel a little niggle in their knee or in their arm and things like that, and immediately they'll run to the physio. But when I think it's very important to talk about the checklist that you mentioned and say that listen, if you are feeling these things, they can be addressed as well, and break that stigma to go and approach it. So this is something now from your book. We all carry scars from different periods in our lives, and then these lead to certain conditioned and trained responses. For us, it's a situation, could be a social situation. For athletes, it's pressure or match situations. They could be losing to the same opponent or choking when ahead in a match. The fear of failure. Fear of failure, I think, is universal, not just related to sports. So these conditioned responses often hurt an individual performance or a team's performance, whether that's sports or non-sports. So, how does one retrain their conditional responses, especially when past failures keep triggering the same reaction? How do you go through that process?
You've asked me to summarize the entire book just now. Because I think a lot of sport and a lot of life is about how do you navigate the ups and the downs and how do you come back from some of those. So various aspects that we have to look at. I think one is to recognize that so-called failure is a part of the journey of success. So I like to say, if you look at a table tennis match, right? You can lose 19 points as long as you win 21, and then also you can lose 3 games as long as you win 4, and you can lose several matches as long as you win one more than that. So to have the capacity to be able to tolerate 49% losses is something that we're going to need, and by being able to do that, you can actually reach the level of a world champion. So to recognize and take those mistakes in our stride. But after that, there are several techniques that we can use. Simulation training has a big role to play. So how players use visualization at a time like that. If you have a certain kind of fear and you perform a little differently because of that, let's say, your grip tends to change, you tend to become a bit stiffer. So how can
Hmm.
you relax yourself? How can you visualize yourself performing better? How can you actually create those similar environmental stimulus in your training environment, similar to if you want to have a public speaking kind of engagement, right? Can you speak in front of one person, then 3 people, gradually build up, start small, increase it gradually. Look at a lot of relaxation training on the side as well. Look at a lot of the thought process that is coming along. What's the self talk that's going on in our mind? What's going to happen? What if I lose? How much are we tending to focus on mistakes at that time? A very simple example that we like to give is, if I tell you, oh, don't think about that plant behind me, don't think about that plant behind me, you're going to think about the plant behind me. That's how the mind works. So if we recognize not to focus on mistakes means focusing on what is right, focusing on what is positive, your focus, your self-talk, your practice, your training, all of those need to come together in that way. So it's these small nuances that we would look at to be able to overcome this kind of a conditioned response.
Got it. Got it. I think you summarized that perfectly, actually, Divya.
I just add one thing, Pranav, here.
Please, sir.
So one of my favorite sports icon, at our age, we've seen the cricket grow the way it was. So let's say if we talk about Tendulkar, so let me ask you two questions. How many zeros did Tendulkar score?
Fair amount.
Right? And how many centuries?
100.
What do you remember?
Yeah.
But what we don't realize is that the zeros were also training grounds.
Yeah.
Zeros, it is how does an athlete or how does an individual learn from what did not go well and still reach your highest performance? The greatest of the greatest will also have very, very bad days. First ball out, missed penalty, double fault at the key moment. This is going to happen. False start, right? You work hard for years and years, and that fraction of a second false start and it's over. This will happen. But that does not take away your core skill set, your effort. So as long as you remember this and this drives you, but you keep learning from it as well.
One of my favorite chapters in your book, actually, where you touched upon was body language. And I find, not just in sports, because I think it's very evident in the corporate world as well. But in sports, you hear people commenting on it. It's not a moment goes by, especially in Test cricket, where you can see the body language. And even as a fan, you can see the body language of your team completely change. Shoulders are drooping. There doesn't seem to be that energy in the field, and then suddenly one wicket and the entire thing changes. There's a spring in everyone's step, and you talk about body language as something that can be trained. So my question here is, a person's body language is usually a reflection, or at least my understanding is usually a reflection of what they're feeling inside. But does it work both ways, where a person's body language impacts what they feel inside, and also can body language be trained?
Absolutely, without a doubt, you're absolutely right. It is a two-way feedback loop that happens. So if you're feeling sad, you're feeling low, your shoulders will be drooped, you will be looking down. One way is to somehow boost your confidence and make you feel better so that your shoulders are straight and you're looking up. The other is to remind yourself to look up, make eye contact, smile at people, raise your shoulders, and you will find a change in mood happening. And while this is something that players can do, I think this is also something where spectators and fans can also really, really help, right? A lot of times we find that when a team is down, the fans also get down, and they kind of, it's a similar kind of a body language. And so if we can actually charge up the fans at that time, get them to be excited, get them to cheer, it can actually boost up our athletes at these crunch times as well. But coming back, yes, absolutely, body language can be trained. So you get players to look at how they appear when they are confident, how they appear when they're less confident, reflect on how they play in those different moments, make it a part of their routine. So every athlete has a pre-shot, a pre-point routine that they have, where they do, let's say, strategize a little bit. They have certain movements, actions that they do. There's certain things that they tell themselves. And within that, if we can have a body language check as well, which reminds them to be able to, have build a more confident body language, then through repetition, it's something that builds. And it's something that it's not just something that you train on field, it's something that you train off the field as well, right? So if I'm working with an athlete, even how they're walking in the cafeteria, in between their games, are they making eye contact with people there, are they smiling there? With one athlete, I had a deal that their teeth must be showing when they're clicking their photograph at the end when they're standing on the podium. And that's the only thing we spoke about afterwards. It wasn't about the color of the medal or any of those things. It was just about, yeah, your teeth were showing, fantastic.
An important topic today is trolling on social media and the impact that it's had on the mental health, not just of athletes and celebrities, but I mean, it's really impacting the lives of teenagers. But if you were to talk, to parents today, whose kids are probably just entering the social media age group where they are starting to create accounts and things like that, what advice would you give them on training their kids to be prepared, because this could happen, and this is how you must be prepared to handle it?
Pranav, I believe media literacy has to be an integral part of our education system. There is no substitute to that. And when I say media literacy, I mean media literacy for teachers, parents, and for students as well. Media literacy for athletes, media literacy for coaches, media literacy at all possible levels, which means one, you need to understand the difference between fact and fiction. You'll need to understand between what's real and not real. You'll need to understand the importance of meaningful relationships and not really how many people are on your platform or so on and so forth. You'll need to learn to live beyond the likes and views, however much they may matter, but you will need to look beyond that. You will need to look within as to what matters to you. You will have to learn how to not let it affect you in a negative way. You will need to be able to either shut your mind to it mindfully or be able to harness it or in your own way fight it. But your goal needs to be you are at the top of your own game, irrespective whether you're an athlete or not. And that skills training is where probably some of our role would also be there. And when I say our, it includes parents, teachers, coaches, and everybody.
Absolutely, and I think you touched upon a very important point about literacy. I mean, I've actually written stuff and done videos on how every IPL team should and every franchise should have literacy, media literacy training for all the, especially the young athletes who, the 16, 17, 18-year-old players that come in and say, look, this is going to happen. We're here to support you, and this is how you can, these are the tips on how you can do that. Going back to your book, I think that you quoted one of my favorite coaching heroes, Vince Lombardi, which I don't know a lot of people in India that might know him, but he's a legendary American football coach. And you say, practice doesn't make perfect, only perfect practice makes perfect. And you have a chapter dedicated to practice. And I think that was so applicable, not just to athletes, even to anyone who's in any sort of work environment. So, what does the right kind of practice look like? And how can both athletes and regular people use it to get better under pressure and stressful situations? Divya, I know I'm asking you guys to summarize the book again, but it's just so fascinating the way you guys put stuff in the book. So I thought everyone would benefit from it.
This time it's just one chapter, so that will be a little bit easier. A lot of times we think about practice as just stacking up hours, and that's not what practice is. Practice is something that needs to be very, very active, very, very intentional. A lot of times we talk to players and they do so much better in practice than they do in matches, because in practice they have a goal to improve a certain skill, or sometimes it just goes and say, oh, I have to practice today, whereas in matches they have different kinds of goals. I have to get this much, this should be my time, this should be my speed, etc. But we need to be as intentional about practice. Every game, every time we're on the field, we need to come in with exactly the same intensity, because what we need to realize is each repetition adds up. So if I am practicing at 40% intensity, then my mind is learning 40% intensity, and I need to recognize that. And whatever I practice more is what is going to actually come out when I'm under pressure. What I practice less, which is my 100%, is not going to come out if I don't practice it each and every time. So the intensity is one aspect that needs to be there. The right kind of environment that we create. So I spoke about this example of Michael Phelps, which was one of my favorite, honestly, where he won his 8th gold medal also despite his goggles filling up with water. And that's only because he had practiced with his goggles filling up with water, and he had learned to count the number of strokes it requires to get to the other side. And so he didn't let that phase him. So it's not just important to practice in an ideal environment, you also need to use that space to understand what all can possibly go wrong in that 1 or 2 minutes of performance, and be able to train all of those elements as well. Need to simulate pressure, right? Again, we compete, we perform differently when we're under pressure, we perform differently when we're relaxed. So everything changes, our heart rate changes, our breathing changes, our grip changes, our body language changes, everything changes. You might notice if there's a camera on you, you'll be different. If the camera's off, you might be different, right? So how are you able to get that peak performance under the lens? Which means that you have to practice with that kind of pressure each and every time. And
how do you simulate pressure?
So different ways, different strategies. One aspect is that, from a psychological perspective, boredom and frustration are two aspects that simulate pressure. Getting other people to watch is something that simulates pressure. You can simulate distractions as well. So things like, building up streaks. You have to get 20 of these in a row, otherwise you start from scratch. Getting more and more people to observe, getting more distractions. So in fact, there's an interesting study that says that if you are just you have a football and you have to kick a goal post. And if you just put a static poster of a goalkeeper, your kick is going to change. So imagine you put a goalkeeper, you put more people there, you get more sound, you create that ambience, you wear your uniform, you create that same kind of environment to the extent that is possible. These are different aspects that you can use to simulate pressure. Similar with test papers as well, which is something that Dr. Parikh often talks about, right? You take your exam in your school uniform, you create a 3-hour question paper, you don't get up during that time, you lock yourself at the same time, you mark yourself with the same red pen, you give yourself the scores. Those are certain ways that you can get some of that pressure. Of course, I don't think anything can prepare you, or anything can mimic the pressure of an Olympic game or a world championship. But these are certain things that you can do to build more self-awareness, know what skills you have in your arsenal that you can use at that time when you're under pressure.
Including not doing anything actually. Seeing at the village, one of the observations I had was that you will actually see all kinds of approaches. You will see an approach where you'll see a coach, an athlete doing a lot of practice one evening before, and you'll also have the absolute reverse also happening, where you'll have the athlete doing absolutely nothing, just strolling, doing nothing, or you'll have somebody doing some imagery, or somebody doing some relaxation, or somebody just talking to a friend back home, or somebody doing some sketching, so on and so forth, which is where the role of people like Divya actually comes, where they help to identify that unique need and unique approach when it comes to an athlete's performance.
I had done an interview with Abhinav Bindra, and I asked him, he was down to the final shot, and I asked him, it was you or the other person that you were tied up with, and how did you prepare yourself? And he said, I practiced it. I practiced that this is the shot. So he said, when I took my shot, he said, if you watch it, I shot early. As soon as I could shoot, I shot, because that's the way I had trained myself. And this is, again, the next question I have is not just towards athletes. I'm going to use athletes as an example, but I think it's towards anyone who's had setbacks in their life. How do you help someone bounce back from a tough loss or an injury or a setback emotionally? What is the process that people and friends and family should follow?
I think two parts to it, and I will let the specifics be answered by Divya. But first and foremost, are you or anyone listening to this, have you ever seen a single story, anecdote, example where there is only and only good moments and only success? Is it even possible? If it isn't, then that needs to be the premise where we start from. Everybody has had what is perceived as failures. Everybody has had bad days. Everybody has had setbacks. That's a fact. And those people who found support from their pillars did better. This is as simple as that. So, if you are going to use negativity, criticism, pushing, making the environment almost hostile without your realizing what you are doing, and if you expect good performance from that individual, personally or professionally, it's not going to happen. And if you are a well-wisher, your key role is going to be when I'm down. You will have to be standing there with me, sometimes just staying quiet. That's probably the best thing you can do for me, because at that moment, the last thing I want to hear is where did I go wrong? You call peers pillars because pillars don't speak. They just support. And there are times in life you just want that support. But at the same time, you will also need to be trained how to bounce back. And that's where Divya comes in.
Yes, I think it's not about how perfectly you can execute things. It is about how quickly you can bounce back from mistakes, which is what a lot of sport is actually about. And I'm glad for that, because I think that if you didn't make mistakes, the game would just be so easy that it would be boring. Imagine playing an effortless game of golf where you just make absolutely no mistakes, every hole is a birdie. You will get bored within 3 months of playing that game. You won't be able to persist for 20 years, because that is what adds to the challenge, that is what adds to the excitement. So I think reframing mistakes as challenges, first of all, something that adds excitement, something that adds joy, is going to be important. We can look at a setback between 2 points. We can look at a setback of losing a game. We can look at a setback as a bad season. We can look at a setback as even a ending injury sometimes, right? So the the time frame may change, right? But how we bounce back from that in some ways is going to be similar. So when players, you have one bad shot and then you have five bad points right after because you're so stuck in that first one, that you're not able to get out of it. You see the same thing happening after a match, where if you lose a match for a week, you're not talking to anybody. You are punishing yourself. You're not eating right. You're holed up in your room. You're not getting out of bed, right? And if you win, then you're out and about, you're celebrating with your friends, you're eating your favorite snacks, you're playing. There is such a contrast between what you do when you win a match and when you lose a match. So even after you lose a match, can you train yourself, give yourself half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours at the most, where you feel your feelings, you feel as bad as you want to, you feel as good as you want to, but after that, it has to be business as usual. You have to get back out, you have to start interacting with your friends, you have to have exactly the same routine that you would have regardless, right? And the time frame is something that
Pranav, I'll just add one thing to what Divya was saying. Let's reverse this, which means let's not look at a failure in 2 hours and then business as usual. How about a winning and then also after celebration business as usual? Because you aren't going to be a champion by one tournament. Whether it's a high or a low, how do you get back to business as usual? Because that's what's going to sustain your success.
Who's the most mentally tough athlete you've seen up close, and what set them apart? What set them apart?
I was born in early 70s. So for me, Mr. Gavaskar's career will always be there. You can read the stories of Nari Contractor, Patodi, One Eye being able to play. What remarkable, unbelievable in the sense that you were also talking about an era where travel wasn't easy, how communication was so difficult. These are people who would have performed quite unbelievably. Mr. Uh, Padukone's match, I still remember it. And P.T. Usha,
Yeah,
Divya?
I think for me, up close was actually watching Simone Biles this time at the 2024 games. That was a particularly special evening. I think that is also an athlete, very, very remarkable. I think if you look at the entire history, the entire trajectory of, seeing her at her 2016 Rio Games, a star who had appeared, then what happened at Tokyo, the twisties that she spoke about, having the courage to take that time off, recognizing that she's not in the right headspace, taking that break. So many people saying it was the biggest mistake of her career, that she would never be able to bounce back. And boy, did she bounce back. I mean, if you saw her, it's phenomenal. I think to be able to talk about mental health, to also put all of your mental strength into practice, into training, is quite a role model for me.
If you could give everyone a 5-minute mental workout a day, what would it include?
I'll let Divya answer this question. Mine would be have some good food, listen to some lovely music, read a good book, uh, speak nice, uh, throw in some positivities around you. Maybe it'll be nice to try and use less of gadgets.
I would give the scientific name to what Dr. Parikh was talking about, which is called mindfulness training.
Yeah,
Uh,
that only, that.
yes. So that is the buzzword in sports psychology as well these days, in mental health as well. And it's something, if you really look at, is going as back to the basics as is possible, right? So mindfulness is present moment focus, without judgment, to be able to be aware in that moment, again, without those distractions. Just that simple act of, just sitting 5 minutes with your own breath, it can improve your focus, it can improve your self awareness, it can help you cope with pressure, it can help you deal with the ups and downs that come as part of it, it can help you visualize it. If it's a 5-minute workout, 5 minutes without your gadgets, without any other intentional distractions, and you just learn to sit with yourself, sit with the world, and get mentally tough.
So, Dr. Parikh, I'm going to read from your book now, and you have a great line in the start where you say, "We all want to learn how to win. To be successful in life, though, it's even more important to learn how to lose, to learn to get better, and to try again the next day." Now, what's happening a lot in schools today, and for especially with young kids, is a lot of schools and a lot of parents are focusing on not being a competitive environment. Kids get a lot of certificates and medals just for participation. There's no real gold, silver, bronze. What's your take on that? Are we actually hampering the next generation by not putting them in a competitive environment? And is it important to learn to win and important to learn to lose?
I mean, yes. First of all, we are in a competitive environment. I mean, let's be very clear about it. I would want participation to be celebrated, but I would also want the effort and the success to also be a learning example. Today, when you read this book, Champions Within You, we've written so many things from lives of champions so that all of us learn from them. That's what sports is. It's a it's a life skill. Even Divya keeps saying that one of the things that we should make it mandatory for young people is watch sports. Play, of course, but watch it also because there
Hmm.
is learning happening. I mean, imagine playing a cricket match without wickets. What you do? I mean, fine, you'll keep playing, 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 but how will you eventually? What is going to be the drive? So we need to understand this. When we push only for numbers and success, yes, we hurt individuals because not everybody at a given moment in time would be there because there's only one person on the podium. Similarly, if you just discourage that completely, or more importantly, dilute the importance of it and only talk about mere participation, not good enough. You need to understand the zeal to do well is what gives you success. The zeal to do well, where you recognize your effort, recognize your performance, recognize your participation, but you want to do well.
I would absolutely agree with you. I think we can't just remove the playing field altogether, right? We need to get people to play and compete. Yet within that, how do you still learn to ignore the scoreboard knowing that it exists? Learn to still enjoy the game knowing that there'll be a and a loser at the end of the day. I think that's what it is, and that's why that's how you learn to, that's why it's life lessons from sport, right? Without, if you're not playing the game, then you're not living life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parikh, and thank you so much, Divya, for joining me today. I would recommend that the first thing you guys do if you watch this interview is go to Amazon and pick up this book. It's a must read. The Champion Within: Life Lessons from Sports Psychology. It's something that you won't put down. It's something that you learn whether you like sports or not. There's so many lessons here. It's a fantastic read. Thank you so much, Dr. Parikh. Thanks again, Divya. It's just been very interesting and educative for me, and I'm sure for everyone that's watched this.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.